Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at something I think most people are going to be at least a little familiar with, and that is the world of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales.
Right.
We're going to be taking a look at some excerpts from their Wikipedia page,
Oh, okay.
and also just diving into a few of the stories themselves.
Yeah.
To get a sense of kind of what they were all about and who these brothers were. And I'm very curious to see kind of what we find out.
Yeah, me too.
So to start with, who were these guys? The
Well,
Brothers Grimm.
so Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, they were scholars.
Okay.
And they lived during a time when Europe was being swept up by the Romantic movement, which was this big cultural shift that kind of rekindled this fascination with folklore. And the Grimms believed that these folk tales weren't just, like simple stories.
Right.
They saw them as holding like the essence of German culture,
Yeah.
almost like a window into the soul of the people.
Oh, that's interesting. So like each story is almost like a little time capsule of
Yeah.
history and culture.
Exactly.
But they didn't just make these stories up, right?
No, not at all.
They collected these from other people.
Yeah, they were incredibly meticulous about how they did this.
Okay.
They collected these tales from people who, had learned them through oral traditions, interviewing people from all walks of life, really trying to get a good sample
Right.
so that they could preserve these stories for
Right.
future generations.
That's amazing.
And this rigorous approach that they took actually laid the foundation for how we study folklore today.
Oh, wow. So they were really pioneers
Yeah.
in their field.
Yeah, absolutely.
I never really thought about that. I just thought they were, guys who wrote fairy tales.
Yeah.
But their work went way beyond just fairy tales as well, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They did other things too.
They delved into, Germanic and Scandinavian mythology
Okay.
and assembled these vast collections of myths. And if that wasn't ambitious enough, they also started working on a comprehensive German dictionary.
Oh, wow.
This massive undertaking that, unfortunately, they never finished.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But let's get back to those fairy tales, though.
Okay.
I think most of us are probably familiar with at least a few of them.
Right.
We all know the Disney versions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
With the princesses and the singing and all that and the happy endings.
Right.
But the original Grimm tales,
Right.
I have a feeling they were a little different
You could say that.
than the Disney versions.
It's important to remember that these stories emerged from a time and a place where life was often pretty harsh
Right.
and unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
And those anxieties and realities found their way into the tales that they were collecting,
Right.
adding this layer of darkness that's often overlooked.
Okay, so give me an example. Like, what's a good example of that?
Well, Hansel and Gretel is a good one.
Okay.
Even in the Disney version, it's a little creepy. But if you think about the original,
Yeah.
the children aren't just kind of wandering through the woods. They're deliberately abandoned by their parents.
Oh, wow.
Because they're experiencing a famine.
Right.
And that gingerbread house,
Right.
it's not just a tempting treat. It's a
yeah.
trap set by a witch
Uh-huh.
who plans to fatten them up
Okay.
and eat them.
Yeah. That's definitely not how Disney told that story.
No, not at all.
What about the Frog King?
Oh, yeah, another classic.
Yeah, that's one I remember.
Yeah.
So what happens in that one?
Well, instead of this sweet kiss transforming the frog,
Yeah.
the princess actually throws him against a wall
Oh, my God.
in disgust.
Okay.
She's forced to honor her promise to let him share her bed,
Okay.
which adds a whole other level of complexity to that story.
Yeah, it does. It's amazing how
Right.
these seemingly simple children's stories
Yeah.
have such dark and complicated undertones.
Right.
What about all the talking animals? They always kind of creeped me out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Why were they in so many of these stories?
Well, I think they often serve as a kind of reminder of the brutality and
Yeah.
magic that are kind of intertwined in these tales.
Right.
For example, in The Goose Girl at the Spring,
Mm-hmm.
the heroine's faithful horse Falada
Okay.
gets his head chopped off
Oh, geez.
and mounted above the city gate.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome, but even in death, he can still speak
Oh, wow.
and ultimately reveals the heroine's plight.
Okay, so even in death, he's still
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah, he's a pretty important character.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like those gruesome elements are right alongside
Right.
the magical elements.
Yeah.
I wonder why they included that. Why include that?
Well, there's a couple of theories that people have put forward.
Okay.
Some scholars believe that these gruesome elements were meant as a sort of moral lesson,
Okay.
warning children about the consequences of bad behavior.
Right.
Other scholars see them as reflections of the anxieties and social realities
Of the time.
of the time.
Okay.
Things like poverty, social hierarchy,
Right.
the constant threat of danger.
So it's like these stories were helping people process the world around them, even the scary parts.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why I think they endured for centuries, because they offer this glimpse into a world that's so vastly different from our own,
Right.
while also tapping into these universal themes that still resonate with us today.
So it's like they weren't just bedtime stories.
Right.
They were cultural mirrors.
Exactly.
Reflecting the beliefs and the fears of the time. Okay, so what are some of the things that we can see reflected in these stories?
Well, one of the big ones, I think, is this ever-present wicked stepmother character.
Oh, yeah?
That pops up in a lot of the stories.
Right.
And I think that likely reveals societal anxieties about family dynamics and female power in a patriarchal world. So the stepmother becomes kind of the scapegoat for all kinds of fears that society has.
That's interesting. I never thought about that before.
Yeah.
And what about all the magic?
Yeah.
It seems like there's always something supernatural happening in these stories.
I think that that's probably a way of trying to explain the unexplainable, offering a sense of hope in the face of difficult circumstances.
So it's almost like the magic is a way of coping.
Yeah, I think so.
With the hardships of life.
Exactly.
Like in Clever Elsie.
Yeah.
Where her imagination and her misplaced cleverness almost leads to disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, who worries about a pickaxe falling on someone's head years in advance?
I know, right? It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it also shows that, resourcefulness and quick thinking were definitely valued.
Yeah.
Even if Elsie maybe took it a little too far in that particular story.
But so we see these tales weren't just for entertainment. They had a deeper purpose.
Right.
They were teaching, reflecting cultural values, and providing a framework for understanding the complexities of the world.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how these stories, despite their darkness, were trying to make sense of life's challenges.
Right.
And I think that's why they resonated with people for so long and still do.
Absolutely.
So we've learned a little bit about who the Brothers Grimm were.
Yeah.
And we've dove into a few of the stories, and we can start to get a sense of what they were all about. But there's a lot more to uncover.
Definitely.
About the Brothers Grimm and the cultural impact of their work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so stay with us. Welcome back. We're continuing to explore the world of the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the things that really strikes me is just how much depth there is.
Right.
To these stories.
Absolutely.
We were talking before the break about the goose girl at the spring and how easy it is to have everything taken from you.
Right.
Your identity, your place in society, and those punishments were something else.
Yeah. They definitely weren't sugar-coated.
No, not at all.
They really reflected the harsh realities of the time.
Right.
But it's important to remember that, even with those brutal elements, they were really trying to impart moral lessons, I think.
Okay.
Highlighting the dangers of things like deceit and greed and disobedience.
It's like, hey, life's tough.
Yeah.
And if you make bad choices, there are going to be consequences.
Exactly.
But sometimes those consequences seem a bit extreme.
Yeah.
Even for a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Like, what about the Maiden Without Hands?
Oh, that one's a powerful story.
Yeah.
Full of betrayal and hardship.
Right.
But I think ultimately there's this kind of resilience in that story that I find really inspiring. You have this young woman who suffers so much, loses her hands, she's manipulated by the devil.
But she just never gives up.
It's almost a story of biblical proportions, the amount of suffering she endures.
Yeah.
But ultimately, she finds redemption.
Yeah, it's a testament to the human spirit, to overcome challenges.
And it speaks to that human desire for justice.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that kind of reminds me of another one.
Okay.
The Jew Among Thorns.
Yeah, that one's
I know even the title is a little jarring to modern ears.
Yeah, definitely a product of its time.
Yeah. It reflects some of the prejudices of the era, for sure. But it also raises these really interesting questions about morality and what constitutes justice.
Right.
Because it's not clear cut.
Yeah. It challenges you to think about it.
So how do we reconcile these stories with our modern sensibilities.
Yeah, that's something that scholars and readers continue to debate.
I think, we have to acknowledge that these stories are products of their time. They reflect attitudes that we might find harmful today.
Right.
But I think there's value in acknowledging that historical context.
Okay.
And using it as a starting point for discussion.
So it's not about erasing these stories or pretending they don't exist.
Yeah.
It's about engaging with them.
Exactly.
With that critical lens and learning from them.
Absolutely.
And, as we're talking, I'm struck by how often transformation pops up.
Oh, yeah.
In these fairy tales.
Right.
It seems like characters are always changing frogs into princes, animals into humans.
Yeah.
Even objects coming to life.
It's a really common motif across cultures.
Okay.
Not just European folklore. I think it symbolizes personal growth.
Okay.
Overcoming obstacles or the power of belief to shape reality.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not always a positive thing, right?
No, not always.
Like in the juniper tree.
Yeah.
She's transformed into a bird.
Right.
But it's almost like a punishment.
Yeah, it's haunting.
Yeah.
It shows that transformation can be both beautiful and terrifying.
Right.
It reflects this duality of magic, how it can be a source of hope, but also destruction.
Like in the donkey cabbage.
Yeah.
Where he eats the enchanted cabbage and he turns into a donkey.
Right. And he wanders around for years.
Yeah.
Before he can become human again.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, for sure.
About greed and desire.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also an interesting story about self-discovery.
Right.
And redemption.
Yeah.
So even when they're exploring these darker aspects, there's always this potential for growth.
Right.
And change.
And hope.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like I'm seeing these stories in a whole new light now.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate their complexity and their lasting impact.
Yeah, the Brothers Grimm left us with a really incredible legacy. And, they continue to shape how we think about storytelling and folklore today.
And there's still so much more to explore.
Definitely.
About their influence and the enduring appeal of these stories.
Right.
So stay with us as we wrap up our exploration of the Brothers Grimm.
Welcome back to our final look at the world of the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really strikes me is how these stories continue to find new life and new meaning through each retelling.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and even the Grimms themselves revised their collections over time, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah, adapting to changing cultural norms and kind of deepening their own understanding as they went.
Yeah, and speaking of evolving, we can't ignore how the Grimm's tales have permeated our pop culture today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
You see them in movies and TV shows and books, even video games.
Yeah.
Draw inspiration from these classic narratives.
Yeah, you see everything from, the classic Disney animated films
Right.
to these darker, more modern interpretations like Into the Woods or The Company of Wolves.
It's almost like their stories are this wellspring of inspiration for artists and storytellers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it's not just about rehashing the plots.
Right.
It's about tapping into those archetypal characters and those timeless conflicts.
Yeah, those really resonate across cultures and across time.
Yeah, the evil queen obsessed with beauty, or the innocent maiden facing danger.
Right.
Or the cunning trickster who outwits their foes.
Yeah, these are figures that just continue to capture our imaginations.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of these tales is that they're so adaptable.
Right.
They can be set in any time period. They can explore all these different perspectives.
Yeah, and you can even flip those traditional gender roles on their head.
Right, it's like their stories are a cultural currency.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's constantly being exchanged and reinterpreted. But why do you think that is?
Why do you think these stories written centuries ago still hold so much power over us?
I think they give us a framework for understanding ourselves and the world around us. They ask these big questions about good and evil and morality and justice. And, they tap into these human experiences that we all share.
Right. Love, loss, betrayal.
Yeah, exactly.
The desire for happiness. And it just reminds us that these challenges are timeless.
Yeah. They're universal.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today,
okay,
what can we take away?
Well, I think one of the big takeaways is that stories are so much more than just entertainment.
Okay.
They hold a mirror up to our past,
Right.
reflecting our values and our anxieties.
Yeah, even our prejudices.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they remind us that storytelling is a powerful tool that can be used to educate, to challenge, and to connect with each other across generations.
It makes you wonder, are there modern-day equivalents to the Brothers Grimm out there?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
You know, with the rise of digital storytelling and the ease with which narratives can travel across the globe, it's certainly possible.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe future generations will look back on our time and glean those same cultural insights from the stories that we're telling today.
Yeah, that's a really cool thought.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I have.
You too.
It's really been an exploration of darkness and light and history and imagination and the enduring power of stories.
Absolutely.
But until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that shape our world.
I love that.
Thanks for joining us.